Hello and welcome to Positively Positive, and I am your host, Susan Mintz. This program is dedicated to highlighting people, places, resources, not just in South Florida, but all over the country. HIV and AIDS has not gone away, and we want to make sure that you have the information to be able to do what you have to do to take good care of yourself, to prevent this. There is no vaccine. I'm so impassioned about this that all I can say is, if you have an HIV AIDS component in your life, whether you work for an agency, no matter who or what or where or why, we want your story, because that's how we are removing the stigma and the other issues pertaining to HIV and AIDS, as well as STDs, one story at a time, one program at a time, one podcast at a time. So Positively Positive is here to highlight you. This night is for you to talk about what you're doing in the fight and in the war and in the battle against HIV. My guest tonight, and I want to give him a lot of time, my guest tonight I have met at several events in South Florida, but when I heard him speak at Richard Jackson's Black Health Summit Expo earlier in the year, I knew I had to have him on as a guest. He is a South Florida, my Caribbean connection, he'll tell you about that, who saw a need. He's very involved with community activism, involved with the MSM community, teaching prevention, education, testing. And he's also, if you've heard of the magazine Hot Spots, he is the chair of many organizations. He's so involved with the LGBTQ community, whether it is being the chair of events for Hotspots or happening out. Is just a marvelous opportunity to welcome such a man who's on the advisory board of things. He just saw a need in his community for color, for ethnicity, for equality. And he said, I can go in there and I can help. So, when the glasses come off, I'm going to introduce my guest and say, with the exotic name, Jameer Baptiste. Come on in.
Hello, and thank you for that warm welcome, Susan.
Your bio, had I really printed it out, could have read on for a long time. However, because what you're doing is so important, I didn't want to spend that time. I'd rather my guests always tell me and tell our viewers what they're doing and why it's important, where you serve and why you did that. Where also, when I heard you speak, where are you from?
I'm actually a native Floridian. I was born and raised in Florida. However, my father is Trinidadian and my mother is Haitian and French.
Is that the Baptiste name?
Yeah. There's actually a unique story behind that. So a lot of people get it right, but actually wrong in the same breath. So my last name is Baptiste, which is synonymous with the Haitian and French community, but it actually belongs to my father's side of the family, which is Trinidadian. So even though you get it right that I am Haitian and French from my last name, it actually belongs to my father's side, which is Trinidadian. And there's some history there where a lot of French settlers ended up in Trinidad. And that's why the last name Baptiste is prominent there. But again, people associate it with being Creole, which is Haitian and French. And luckily, some of my background is Haitian and French, so they get it right. But the origin is actually from my father's side.
Tell me how you got involved with the LGBTQ community, and very specifically in the education and the treatment and the prevention with the MSM community in South Florida? Are you in Fort Lauderdale mostly, or are you all through South Florida?
I would say primarily Fort Lauderdale, but I do travel Tri-County, whether it's West Palm Beach or Miami Beach.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
And for
so
those of us who don't know, MSM stands for men who are having sex with men, men who have sex with men. So that's the acronym as MSM. And to your question, how did I get into this? In college, I really put my best foot forward to be part of the community and advocate on behalf of the community. I came out while I was like 18 years old. So for people my age, that's relatively early. For other people, a lot of people nowadays, where we're getting younger and more comfortable with who we are, we're coming out earlier. In some cases, that might be a little bit late. But for me, it was a eye-opener to understanding my community. And in order for me to learn and educate myself about my community, I started diving into certain groups and activities that really spoke to the identity that is LGBTQ plus. And so I started working with my alma mater's Straight and Gay Alliance, which was called the Stonewall Alliance. I became vice president of that while I was in college. My alma mater is actually Florida International University. So that's why I went to school. And our GSA, again, was called Stonewall Alliance. I started participating in that group and became the vice president. And then we had a political apparatus of the LGBTQ plus community at Florida International University as well, which was called the GLBT Coalition. And I became the president of that. So it really started in my collegiate days, where I started really advocating and putting my best foot forward and volunteering with certain organizations that were LGBTQ plus led. Other than those two organizations that I served on, I also joined the fraternity Delta Lambda Phi, which is one of the only brotherhoods nationally recognized. And we were a social fraternity for men who have sex with men, and bisexual men as well.
You speak so well, and that's what I remember when you were at Richardo's event. You spoke about so many different topics. You were into mental health, you were into the awareness in your community, but you had so many things that were in your heart to talk about. So you felt in college that this was a need that you had because of your own sexuality, but you had a need that you knew. Was it also because of your background, your nationality, and the color of components, or several things that led you also into this?
I think it was a multitude of things, but really the biggest thing for me was to educate myself about my community. When I did come out, it was really an isolated experience, not necessarily because of the typical reason why it was isolating, but a little bit different. And not to go too deep into it, because I know that we're on a time limit, but when I came out with in a relationship. So I was already in a relationship with my high school sweetheart. And so when I say it's isolating, it is because I came out in a relationship. So it was really, I knew I was gay and I was with my partner. And that was the whole aspect of the gay life that I knew. I didn't really explore. I had my comforts at home, which was my relationship. So there really wasn't really any knowledge that I was gaining. Like I didn't know about gay culture and things of that nature because I was isolated in this little bubble of mine, which was my relationship. And fortunately, I had my family that was very accepting. So it was me and my partner and my family. And I didn't know about gay life. And when I decided to go to college, I took that opportunity to say, let me educate myself on my community. And while educating myself on my community, I learned so much about my community and the deficiencies and challenges that exist within the community, which really resonated with me as a Black man. So that's where that tie-in comes from, Susan.
So
The fact that being a Black man and knowing the struggles that my community has gone through, and then to add an extra layer to learn and experience firsthand what my LGBTQ plus community had to go to as well, is kind of like hand in hand for me, where it's like the struggle is real, and we need people to be on the front lines and stand up and kind of advocate for us.
So you've been on a self-exploratory journey now for quite a while. The more you're involved, the more you seem to be learning about yourself.
Right. And it's always a learning process, right? You're always learning. But I did get to a point where it was like, I know so much that now I need to do my part. I educated myself. I dived in. I really started experiencing the culture and the life, and really understanding what that meant for us, and having firsthand knowledge, whether it is the upper echelon of gay society, and also hanging out with the transgender community that I've known and found a family with, and learned about their struggles and things of that nature. From both sides of the track, I had experiences and understanding, and now it was my turn to share that with the world, to educate people, and also let them understand what that meant and how I learned about it, and spread that on to other people and advocate for the community.
I think you would be, and you are, an excellent teacher. I only heard you, I met you at a few events, but I only heard you the one time. But you definitely come on as someone who is very fluent in what he's wanting to say, and you're genuine. And that's what I look for, is a genuine sincerity when people are. So you didn't just do this because you had a relationship. You felt that this was going to be a call on your life.
Right. It really became a call, because it was kind of, hey, let me learn about my community, and then learning all that information and what that struggle existed, and how that really resonates with people, and sometimes even is a very impactful occurrence on lives, what that looks like. And if you have the ability to do so, not everybody does, and not everybody wants to, but if you have the passion to do so, why not? And for me, it truly is kind of a passion to do so, especially with HIV and STIs. I've been very fortunate myself to not necessarily have to deal with a lot of struggles in that area, even as an individual who has been promiscuous, and has put themselves out there in quote unquote risky situations. I want people to know that there is a path forward in any aspect of life that you choose. Like, hey, you can be living with HIV and still thrive and be happy and love and care. There's also individuals like me who's not necessarily living with HIV, but can lend their resources and their voice to a community to understand that there are ways to be happy. There are ways to live with HIV. There's also ways to be a person who enjoys sex, but also wants to be strong and self-aware in who they are, and how to move in a positive way in doing so.
And I think you're very big into empowering people. You don't talk down to people. You empower, because you're an example of someone who saw a need, had this issue in his life, had this challenge at first in his life, and then openly with his family, and openly said, I have to do something with what I'm learning and what I'm doing.
Right.
That's powerful. I mean, that's what this show has been about, is that We want to highlight people who've taken it upon themselves, not been coerced or pushed or anything. We want you to tell your story. And now the other thing is hot spots. I need to know all there is as a woman about hot spots. And I don't mean mine. I'm talking about mine stopped being hot a long time ago. I just want to talk about the magazine, which I have seen in places, and happening out. Tell me about your other roles with this, because again, this is a publication that goes all throughout South Florida. Are you outside of Florida also?
Mainly South Florida and all of Florida, yes. And like you mentioned in the beginning, I am the chair of the MSED Advisory Group, which is a community-based group that teaches and works on prevention, treatment, and education about HIV, AIDS, and STIs with men who in Broward County for the most part. But outside of that, through my work experience, what I do is I'm the president of the events division of Hotspots Happening Now, which is a multimedia LGBTQ organization, nonprofit organization here in Florida. And it consists of a print publication, like you said, Hotspots Magazine, a television network, which is our Happening Out arm, and an events-driven group as well, nonprofit group that has events like Stonewall Pride that attracts around 50,000 people every year to Wilton Manors area, the greater Fort Lauderdale area. We started one that I love so much, which is Pride Fest, a unique experience for the LGBTQ plus Caribbean community to enjoy their culture, which is usually disenfranchised because of the intolerance that exists within the Caribbean community. Not to say there's only intolerance in the Caribbean community, but it tends to be prevalent to where our community can't necessarily celebrate their Caribbean culture and heritage. And we provide that safe space, which is essentially the mission of Hotspots Happening Now's events division, is to provide safe space LGBTQ plus social and cultural experiences.
That's what I remember the most. It was the Caribbean to expose, because your culture by nature would be a little bit more ostracizing, to use a better word. And you felt therefore that the need was there for you to definitely be visible in that respect, to bring the Caribbean culture, the Caribbean community, all the Caribbean, that they could begin to feel comfortable with their sexuality.
Yeah, definitely. And it's such a unique experience because I don't know how to articulate it so much in words. And even though I thank you for your kind words with saying that I have a great way of speaking, but it's so hard to mix it all together. So I'll try my best to explain, because it kind of goes into the superficial aspect of things, but it really speaks to the mingling of the identities and cultures into one, right? And so what's so prevalent in the Caribbean community that is also celebrated in the gay community is sex appeal. If you ever gone to Carnival all over the world, they even have it in countries that aren't inherently Caribbean. Like, for instance, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil has one of the biggest carnivals in the world. But one thing that is synonymous with all the carnivals throughout the world is sex appeal. When you see people wearing those big feathers and all that stuff, you see them in barely no clothes and looking very sexy and body positive and all of that stuff. And that is so LGBTQ on track. Like, a lot of times people think that we go too far with it, and they're like, pride isn't about jock straps and da-da-da-da. And it's so interesting that the gay community is like that, and so is the Caribbean community. But then there's still that divide down the middle where they can't intersect, because the Caribbean community just, like you said, perfect word, ostracizes the gay community and looks down on them. So the thing that both of our communities celebrate, sex appeal, is so hard to come together to find that. And we found that perfect ground to say, you can enjoy and really celebrate your heritage, something that we love as gay individuals in terms of looking sexy, going out there, being body positive, and enjoying yourself in a very rich and cultural way without the intolerance, the fear of violence, being able to hold your hand with your partner while you're whining. That is certain dance that we call in the Caribbean. Being able to do that and live in your truth at the same time is such a recipe for happiness,
I use the word empowering an awful lot when I speak to people, because I think that's what a part of it is. You empower people when you empower yourself.
That is a true statement. You hit that nail right on the head.
Check that box off. Next time you see me, just give me a big check mark for that one. But it is true. You can't also preach or teach or do to others unless you have your own act together, because sexuality and the issues that people are facing today in the marginalized communities are so real. They're so in your face. They are blatant that unless you also are equally I don't mean in someone's face in a bad way, but unless you are vocal and you definitely have a good agenda and you stay firm on your core beliefs and values, you have to, because if not, you will be almost wiped out today. Because
like lost in the sauce, kind of. Because
yes,
right, and it's a difficult balance to toe. It's a different, because it truly is very boggling to understand where we're at currently with HIV and AIDS. Like Florida still is at the top of the list. How are we constantly at the top of the list? And what are we doing to push that down? Where are we at with ending the epidemic? How are we doing our part to do that? And part of that is empowering yourself so that you can empower others, right? Mm-hmm. Part of that is letting people understand. I think one of the biggest divides that we have between educators and individuals that necessarily are people like you and I who speak of this and talk about it is that a lot of times the community can't relate to us because we're given this sermon, for lack of a better phrase, on the pulpit and they look at us like, oh, they think they're better than us or something like that. So how do you become that person who's like, hey, I understand where you're coming from. I'm the same person. Mm-hmm. I enjoy having sex. Sometimes when I do have sex, there aren't condoms involved. And sometimes I do have anonymous sex and things like that, to make yourself seem real to those people, and that you connect on a level of understanding that I'm an individual just like you. Now, mm-hmm. The only difference is that I might know the resources and I'm willing to give you those resources as well. Like, for instance, if I have unprotected sex, I know that I can go get PEP, post exposure prophylactics, within 72 hours of intercourse, and I want to share that with you. I don't necessarily want to say to them, Susan, hey, don't have sex without condoms. Yes, it is very important to protect yourself, right? But if you do happen to have sex without a condom, here's a resource. Here are resources. Here is medication that can ultimately help you with not contracting, right? Hey, you want to get on PrEP, but I have a boyfriend. What do I need to be on PrEP for? Of course, PrEP is pre-exposure prophylactics, where it can help prevent HIV. Well, I have a boyfriend. Well, we could have a real conversation of what that looks like. Are you in a monogamous relationship? Right. How long have you been in the relationship? Have you had that conversation with them? And now there's DoxyPep out there, for those of us who are on PrEP, but still and feel like, hey, because I'm on PrEP, I don't necessarily feel that I need to wear condoms as often as I want. Now you have DoxyPep, which can help reduce the contraction of STIs, So to have all this information and be able to share it with them on a level of compassion and understanding me
Mhm.
like you know, instead of me preaching it to you, hey, I'm an individual that goes through those same things that you do, those same desires, those same wants, and all that stuff. So we're talking on a mutual level as two
Mhm.
individuals rather than like this hierarchy that sometimes could be perpetuated or feel like it's being perpetuated.
And Jameer, no matter how many seasons this show is, we're always going to treat everybody with that respect. I don't want people talking over each other, which I have a habit of doing, and I'm trying to get better because there is that little lapse. We're not in the same studios together. We're remote. And at first, the little glitches made me crazy, and now it's a glitch. They'll be fine, no problem. I think what is a great word that we should call ourselves is called conduits. And I wanted to put that on a card, with my business card, to say Susan Mintz conduit. And what's that? I can do it. Can do it. And that's what we are. We're vessels on a journey in life, doing the best with what we have, what we have and our resources. How is Florida doing with with communication and HIV and STIs and everything else that's going on in your world?
I feel like to be honest with you, I feel like we're not hitting the mark, right? And why are we not hitting the mark? In my personal opinion, is because we're truly not reaching the community at large.
Mm.
One thing that frustrates me about the conferences that we have, we're usually speaking to our colleagues. It's usually our
Yes.
colleagues coming and supporting us, which is great. I love the support. I definitely want to see my colleagues really helping me in my endeavors and advocating as well. But the true people that we need to reach are the people that we need to get into the room. Those individuals that
Right.
don't really know this information or have misinformation about it. There's still people out there that don't realize that women could be on PrEP as well. Now, they might not be able to take one medication over the other, but they can
Mm.
certainly be on PrEP. We have some people out there that still think, oh, you take it at random instead of every day. There's some people out there that
Yeah.
don't realize that, hey, there is such a thing even called PEP out there that you could
Mm.
take after the fact. So we need to be able to reach those people. And I honestly believe the way to reach those people is to see them where they're at, give
Yeah.
them what they need, what excites them. Normally these very very how would you say, like, very uptight conferences, for lack of a better phrase, doesn't excite them. So what can we do to meet them where they're at, where we're getting their attention, but on their level, so that they're not like, oh, I'm not going to a conference. Some people can't even afford the conference or don't have the transportation there, or some of them just don't have the desire to be in that type of setting. So how can we build experiences for them? Because
Mhm.
to your to your question, your original question of how are we doing in Florida, again, like I mentioned, we still have one of the highest rates in the top
Mhm.
5, and that's
Mhm.
not just one county in Florida, that's a couple of them. So
Mhm.
it's like we need to do better, and there's resources all out here for our community, but for some reason they're not getting to them, whether it's systemic racism, whether it is us not going into the community, the marginalized communities that really need it, or
Yes.
it's us not effectively communicating with our community. We need to find a way to do so. And that's where the challenge exists for me. And is trying to find those ways to build that bridge. And I think I found a way that would possibly help, and energize the community to come out. And I'm going to try to implement that next year with our MSN advisory group. We successfully did a men's wellness conference 2 years in a row after COVID around that time. And we handed it off to the state, which didn't materialize for 2 years. And I think that re-energized us to get back on the ground and build it up again. So we're hoping for 2026 that we could really reintroduce that to the community and really tap into our community base to get them the education, treatment, and prevention information that they so desire and so readily available to them.
That's wonderful, because people shouldn't be shunned. It's not as if your life is affecting me. My life shouldn't affect you. Your life, and it just doesn't work that way. I think building a bridge means that you have to meet people where they are, but you have to go into the enemy camp. All right. Look at me, the way I'm dressed up. When you see me at an event, I'm normal. I might have a wig on or I might have something else, but I'm not like this. I don't walk around the streets or go to Publix looking like this. But sometimes you got to go into the enemy camp. This program, yes, focuses on HIV and AIDS, but it's all over the place with people from all over the country. This is a platform. Use this platform. Tell people about what we're doing, because through this media right now, just this podcast, we can reach some who might be having a hard time with their sexuality, who are in South Florida or other places. They never heard of PrEP or PEP. So when did PrEP and PEP finally really start coming out to help people? And can that be gotten all over the country through the health departments, doctors? How do you get that?
Well, it's been out for some time now. It's relatively still new. So that's why the information's going out there. But when you speak about new in terms of medication, it's been around for over a decade now. And there are new advances every so often. Like, for instance, with PrEP, it first started out with a pill every day. Now they have shots that you could take every 6 months. And there's even some newer medication being tested, whereas every year and so on and so forth, and PEP came about around the same time and has been around for a good amount of time, and now it's getting that information out there. But the resources exist, and one thing that you mentioned, can you get it from the state and stuff like that? And they did have programs, but with the current administration, unfortunately, those programs are getting rolled back. And whether it's the federal administration or in our case, Florida being, the state administration, we got a double header where both of them are trying to roll back these things, and it's making it that much harder for the state to provide these resources at an affordable and even free level for many people. So now it looks like it's gonna the medication companies and like places like Gilead and ViiV are gonna have to start stepping up and filling the gap where these services that once were provided by the state and federal government are no longer in existence. Like, we could talk about the research study HPTN 096 that was just shuttered this year because of the freezes that happened at the federal level. This was a research that was supposed to provide some extensive rehabilitation and reorganization of HIV and STI research in hard-hit areas in the South region of America, where it runs rampant. And unfortunately, they had to close down because of restrictions by the federal government, like you said, funding and what have you. So again, the resources are out there. How do you get them to them? And now we're, as educators and individuals that are advocators for these things and advocates for HIV, AIDS, and STI treatment prevention and what have you. Now you have to educate yourself on new ways and understandings of going about getting these care and resources for individuals that need them.
And where can people find out about you, your information? We want to post that. And also, where can they get hotspots? I'm interested in getting a copy.
Well, we are online at hotspotsmagazine.com, but we are a print publication and we're on newsstands primarily throughout Wilton Manors because that's the gay hub of South Florida,
Right.
but all throughout West Palm and Miami as well, usually in hot pocket areas of the gay community. So if you would see a gay establishment or anything that is remotely tolerant of the LGBT community, we would be in those facilities where you could pick up a hard copy. But again, you could go online at hotspotsmagazine.com and you could see our magazine issues there that comes out bi-weekly. Every other Thursday, they hit newsstands throughout South Florida.
And your position with them is what now?
I'm the president of the events division, which is basically social and cultural events for the LGBT community in a safe space environment. So again, we do something like Stonewall Pride, which takes place in Wilton Manors, attracts 50,000 people, and is on June 14th this year. It usually falls on the same weekend as Father's Day. We have Pride Fest, which is our LGBTQ plus celebration, which takes place every August. This year is August 9th. We also have our Black History Month celebration cookout, which takes place the first weekend of February of Black History Month, and a slew of other events that you could also go online at hotspotsmagazine.com and go to our event section.
So if I come down to Wilton Mill, who we are.
Yes. And we'll show you around town.
That's great. So it's hotspotsmagazine.com.
Right.
Yeah, I've been down there a lot. I've been down there with many people over the decades, and I enjoy it. The restaurants are great. But we have your information here, which is really great. So where do you see yourself going with all of this? I mean, you probably love South Florida. You've been here, made it your home. Where do you see this HIV and STIs and all this other stuff? Where do you see it in the next few years? I think we could do a much better job, but where do you see it going?
I'm hoping that we stay on track for ending the epidemic. I'm a little bit concerned about that initiative because of what the current administrations are doing. You know, they're kind of rolling back the clock, and it's going to take a lot more effort to keep on the same track. You know, we're still falling behind a great deal, in my personal opinion, and which is supported by the numbers, you know. But optimistically speaking, we have the resources to do it. We just need to make sure that we stay fast and we continue putting out the information out there, seeking the proper information. What can be done if the federal or state government takes away certain services and resources? How can we compensate? Who can compensate? How can we come together and build these type of understandings and keep on moving the needle forward rather than it falling back? Because we are fighting an uphill battle. We've always been fighting an uphill battle, but currently it's gotten that much more difficult with what's going on in the administration. And it's unfortunate to say that, but it's a true fact, and we have to live in this current environment for at least another 4 years. So what are we going to do as a community to make sure that we don't fall on our faces as it relates to prevention and treatment?
Well, literally, South Florida is a hot spot for incubating a lot of viruses. Do you think, though, that it's not just communication, but don't you think that it's really important that you step out of your comfort zone and really go into the areas? Like the churches are in denial a lot, that you have demographics you're dealing with. We are so demographically loaded up here. And I just think you're dealing in general with so much diversity. How do you stay uphill and energized to be able to continue when you have a lot of factors that are going against you, your culture, your sexuality, your lifestyle?
Right. It's really finding those individuals that allow you in those spaces. You know, you have to find the opening where they exist. And there's a lot of them that are open. There are a lot that aren't open, but you have to, in my personal opinion, of course, find those spaces. Now, I will say that some people say that you have to break through those barriers, and finding those cracks is where you do break through those barriers. Like, for example, at Campbell's Health Expo that they had, that we both had the privilege to go to, there was a panel of spiritual individuals, church individuals. Those are people that you could say, hey, you had an opportunity to speak at the panel. You were welcoming and receptive to being in LGBTQ plus space. How can we turn that around and now enter your space and educate people and come into contact with individuals that would on a normal basis not come in contact with this information? Because it's great to have you in our spaces, but like you said, Susan, how do we turn that around and pivot into your space where the uncomfortability exists? My sister caught me on something yesterday, and it's kind of interesting, where she was like, well, I said, yeah, if I lived in a straight area, I probably wouldn't know my neighbors, but if I live in a gay neighborhood, I'd be talking to everybody. And she's like, well, what is that about? And I had to stop and think, what is that about? Like, like you said, you have to put yourself in those uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
So that made me think, like, even if I'm in a predominantly heterosexual area, I need to be willing to put myself out there and say, hey, just because I don't necessarily have everything in common with you doesn't mean that I can't come out of my comfort zone and communicate with you and find common ground to where we could probably move the needle forward together.
Yeah, I think I think nobody wants to walk through a minefield, but it's amazing how many people are still willing to do it.
Right.
And I think when it comes to the LGBTQ community, the MSM community, and other, I say marginalized because marginalized suits a whole big plethora of people. I think that you have to be willing to step out of where you are and reach people of a whole nother color, a whole nother demographics, a whole nother everything. And so I am so happy that we were able to get you on. I just thank you that I met you when we did, and that I meet you at more events. And I am going to plan on coming down to Wilton Manors more, because there's several guests we've had on from Wilton Manors. I feel like it's going to be my second home.
Right. And we'll definitely host you when you come down. And thank you so much, Susan, for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. It's always amazing to see your beautiful face. And to all the people that work on this production that are behind the scenes, I want to thank them as well for being able to uplift you in an environment that you excel in.
And keep doing the work that you are doing, because it's necessary. You are really you're articulate and educated and informed, and you are a resource for South Florida and way beyond. So while I still have a moment, I just want to thank you again, Jameer Baptiste. And your information was up there, but you can always read it at hotspotsmagazine.com.
Yes.
I just love the name. And I do, hotspots. Don't ever say that to a woman. And really, we share a lot. So the main thing is that I want to thank our viewers for supporting us, for Campbell Health, for seeing the need, and Susan Mintz, the host of Positively Positive. We're always going to be committed to love.